now we have Ian Angus. Ian Angus lives near Ottawa. He's currently on a speaking tour across Canada to discuss the founding of the EcoSocialist International Network. Ian first became active in socialist politics in the 1960s through the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and through the Vietnam anti-war movement. He's a well-known historian on the Canadian left. He is the director of the Socialist History Project, and he has written the book Canadian Bolsheviks. He writes frequently for left-wing publications in Canada, including Socialist Voice, New Socialist, Relay, and Canadian Dimensions. Ian is the editor of Climate and Capitalism, an online journal whose slogan is Eco-Socialism or Barbarism, there is no third way. In October, Ian took part in the founding meeting of the Eco-Socialist International Network held in Paris. He was elected to the network's coordinating committee and to an editorial committee that is charged with drafting a new eco-socialist manifesto. So everyone, a round welcome for...
The world is suffering from a fever due to climate change, and the disease is the capitalist development model. That was the opening sentence of a truly remarkable letter that was sent to the United Nations on September the 24th by Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia, the first indigenous head of state in Latin America. That letter and the speech he made at the UN session on climate change that same day are really powerful statements of and powerful examples of a very important development. The convergence of the new rise of mass anti-capitalist struggles in Latin America with the rise of movements and political views that can be called eco-socialist. The question that seems to come up most often when I discuss this, especially with left-wing audiences, is why eco-socialism? Why not just socialism? And after all, people like John Bellamy Foster and Paul Burkett and others have done wonderful work showing that Marx and Engels were deeply concerned about humanity's relationship with nature, and Marxism has always, although the word ecology did not exist in their time, the concepts did, and they were very committed to them. There are what we would today call ecological ideas are deeply embedded in Marxist writings. And then right up until the late 1920s, there was a very active and influential ecology movement in the Soviet Union. So why do we need a new word? New words are always, what are you doing that for? Well, it's true that Marxism does have a terrific heritage here. But it's also true that during the 20th century, socialists tended to forget or ignore their own tradition in this area. Socialists of all political currents. And they supported, adopted, in some places implemented, approaches to economic growth and to development that were grossly harmful to the environment. And the ecological records of the Soviet Union, of China, are certainly, many people would agree to that. And even in the countries where capitalism remained in effect in North America, if you read what was written during that the past century, a great deal of it was certainly insensitive to ecological issues, at least not aware of them. So one reason for using the term eco-socialism is simply to signal loud and clear that we view ecology and climate change not just as another stick to beat capitalism with, but as a critically important issue, one of the principal problems facing humanity in this century. So that's one reason for using the term. But there's more in that involved. And I realize I haven't been changing my slides. Here we go. Marxism is not a fixed set of eternal truths. It's not a set of rules that were laid down in the 19th century and they never change. It's a living body of thought, a method of understanding society, and a tool for social change. Socialists who don't evolve to incorporate new social and scientific insights become irrelevant sectarians. And we've seen that happen to many individuals and groups over the years. You know, Marx and Engels, if you look at their lives, they constantly were reading the science of their day. and trying to see how it would fit in with their views. Marx paid, and they both paid close attention to Liebig, who was the great 19th century expert on soil fertility, to Morgan, Lewis Morgan on early society, to Darwin on evolution, and to many others. And they evolved their ideas as science evolved. They were intensely interested. So Marxists today have to do that same thing. We have to learn from this great science of our own day. Eco-socialism is Marxism enhanced by the thoughts and analysis of modern ecology. It is, of course, a relatively new term for a relatively new political development, and different people use the term in different ways. I should be clear, these are my views today. The EcoSocialist International Network doesn't even have a policy on these things. We've just agreed to start working together. So this is my take on it. Different people use the word in different ways, and they often put quite different content into it. What's more, like the shorter word socialism, eco-socialism is used for three different but related things. It's a goal, a global eco-socialist society. It's a body of political, economic, and social thought that combines socialist and ecological ideas. And it's a movement. A growing number of activists worldwide who believe, although most of them would not use this phrase, that the only way to stop ecological destruction is through what the authors of the Communist Manifesto called, in a phrase I truly love, despotic inroads on the rights of property and on the conditions of bourgeois production. And that's not a slogan you put up on a sign and carry around. Doesn't buy much, stand in the street corner. But it's a concept that the way we are going to solve the ecological problems is by placing severe restrictions on the conditions of bourgeois production. As a goal, eco-socialism aims to replace capitalism with a society in which profit is no longer the driving economic force, in which common ownership of the means of production has replaced capitalist ownership, and in which the preservation and restoration of ecosystems is central to all activity. Now, those statements are pretty general. They reflect the long-standing Marxist tradition, refusal to engage in utopian speculation about the course of future history. We don't know exactly the circumstances or the timing under which socialism will come about, so to try and say exactly how it's going to happen is mostly guesswork. Marx said this as he said he would not write recipes for the chefs of the future. And Rosa Luxemburg said, really the best we can do is erect signposts that point towards the future, not maps. And she said even though signposts are mostly negative, they're mostly criticisms of the present order rather than clear descriptions of the new society. Now, obviously, we need a broad vision of what we're fighting for. And I've talked a little bit about that, and many of us have more things that we think would be typical of an eco-socialist society. But our focus is on relentless criticism of the existing destructive order, and on building movements that can actually implement and impose those despotic inroads on the rights of property that will ultimately bring the system down and create a new one. As a body of ideas, eco-socialism argues that ecological destruction is not an accidental feature of capitalism. It is built into the system's DNA. It's fundamental to how capitalism works. This system's insatiable need to increase profits, what Foster has called, John Bellamy Foster is another phrase I like, what he calls the ecological tyranny of the bottom line, that can't be reformed away. That capitalism is a system that by its nature causes ecological damage and destruction. If you're interested in Marxism and socialist theory, one of the most exciting developments, in fact, in the past few years has been a new wave of Marxist scholarship dealing with ecology. A dozen or more books, hundreds of essays and articles have come out in the past decade or so. Books like Joel Kogel's The Enemy of Nature, John Bellamy Foster's Ecology Against Capitalism and Marx's Ecology, James O'Connor's Natural Causes. Those books belong on every socialist reading list, and that is just a beginning. You know, a few years ago, the problem in this area was that it was hard to find anything to read. The problem now is to figure out where to start. And if you want advice, a good place to start actually is Ecology Against Capitalism by John Bellamy Foster, a really good collection of essays. Now, of course, there are far more non-Marxist books on the subject, but there's an intriguing, I'm convinced this is a whole new genre of books, and this is books that do really well for the first 19 chapters and fall apart in the 20th. Book after book brilliantly describes the problem and the looming catastrophe, and then tells us that the solution is to change our light bulbs, or vote for carbon taxes. Not bad ideas, but hopelessly inadequate to the problem that they themselves describe. Where Marxism is consistently superior is in explaining why capitalism is fouling up our world. At the root, global warming is not caused by stupidity, it's not caused by short-sighted decision makers, or by outdated pro-growth ideology. It's caused by capitalism's insatiable need to increase profit. Anyone who doesn't understand that, and sadly that's true of the authors of most of the books you get to read, doesn't understand global warming and can't offer meaningful solutions to it. The rise of eco-socialism reflects two parallel political developments, political trends. The spread of Marxist ideas in the Green Movement and the spread of ecological ideas in the Marxist left. These have taken place pretty much in parallel. Then what we're now seeing is a convergence of those two processes. The result is not, and I have to stress this, a new or separate movement. It's a current within existing socialist and green left movements, a current that seeks to win ecology activists to socialism and to convince socialists of the vital importance of ecological issues and struggles. You could say that in the global north, the central goal of eco-socialism today is to make the greens more red and the reds more green. I said that the last time I gave this talk, and a friend of mine came up to me afterwards, somebody whose views I strongly reflect, and he said, you know, what that really means is making the greens more green and the reds more red. Because what it's about is convincing the greens that only profound social and economic change can achieve the green goal of sustainable, ecologically balanced world. That is, to be really green, you have to be a socialist. And we aim to convince the socialists that real socialism requires a commitment to a sustainable, ecologically balanced world. In other words, you can't be a real socialist if you're not committed to ecology. And it won't be a real socialist society unless that's central to its operations. So as I say, eco-socialism doesn't compete with or replace existing ecology or socialist movements. What it tries to do is to extend, enhance, and complete both of those trends. That's typically what we're seeing in Europe, as I say, and in North America. But what I'm most excited about at this time is a phenomenon that has gone largely unreported in the mass media. The rise of mass eco-socialist and anti-capitalist eco-socialist movements in the global south.